afternoon. We are pleased to welcome all of you here in this room, named after the first rector of this university, Mikhail Samovich. And today is a great privilege for us to welcome our university, our esteemed guest, Professor Nobel. I think that the surname Nobel is familiar to everybody, and you know, and Michael has some direct contact to this surname. I think that during our session of lecturing and session of questions and answers, we could ask and listen to questions concerning dynasty of Nobel, about other things connected with this very famous family. I don't know whether I need to go into details concerning the place, year of birth of Michael Nobel and other details. I think he will tell us himself what he needs us to hear. So at this point I would like to give the floor to our esteemed guest, Professor Michael Nobel, and let's invite him to make it.
Good to be here. I really appreciate it. And I'm of course, very pleased to be able to come to this prestigious institution. And I would particularly like to thank and express my gratitude to Rector Professor Dr. Leonid Shevchenka, and also to the pre-rector here, Professor H, and to Dr. Andrei Shevchenka, and of course all of you guys at the audience for coming here today. So thank you all of you. I'd like to start with the first here. You know that actually today the Oxford Dictionary describes the Nobel Prize as the world's most prestigious award. Several international studies have shown that the name Nobel, just the name Nobel today, is one of the most well-known and respected the world over. It has a trademark something similar to Microsoft or Apple in its value. To me, this is a little bit strange because, I mean, they had this, and I will tell you more about my great-grandparents, or rather the forefathers. But ever since, they have done very little, and for 3 generations. And it's, you know, there are many other inventors that have done fantastic accomplishments. And Alfred, you know, he invented dynamite, and he made a fortune, and the two brothers were good businessmen and good chemists, Robert. But I really don't see the fame. So what I will try to do is I will talk a little bit about these people, Alfred, Robert, the 3 brothers, who in their way were geniuses. And then also the Alfred Nobel and why he created the Nobel Prize and what it means today. So the strange thing is that this name, this is Alfred Nobel, the only my great-grand-uncle. He's on my great-grandfather was the brother, Ludwig Nobel. And I will tell you more about him. But when I go around the world and I give around lectures in other schools, I find to my surprise that almost everybody knows the name Nobel and Alfred Nobel and the dynamite and the Nobel Prize. And there are literally hundreds of other prizes and awards and so on. But for some reason, and I will tell you the reasons, why hasn't these prizes become in any way near the Nobel Prize? So I will tell you here. This is the reason is that you have here the grandfather, because one interesting thing medically is to see what role does inheritance, the genes of inheritance play, and what is of course the surroundings. And I think that in both cases they play an important role. Because this man, I mean, we came from the peasants, from farmers, on the 17th century in the south part of Sweden, in a small village called Nobel. And he took the name was Olofsson, just an ordinary common name. And one of the guys took the name Nobelius and went to Uppsala because he felt he needed a little bit of a more of a snazzy name. But he was not something very accomplished, but he made something very good. He married the daughter of this man. And this man was an absolutely and universal genius. He was called Leonardo of the North. And he was good in almost everything. He was the rector magnificus of the Uppsala University. He completely revised that. I think he discovered the lymphatic nervous system. He invented, a whole new book about birds and about bees, and he was into everything. He constructed buildings. He discovered the greatest botanist after Linnaeus. He painted, he composed, he wrote books. And one funny thing was that he wrote a book called Atlantica. And Atlantica, there he tried to prove that Sweden, of all countries, was the original Atlantis, which I, as a Swede, of course, believe this is completely true. It must have been Atlantis, which he meant. No, but joking aside, he was really, and I believe that to some extent the genes passed on through his daughter and to my great-grandfather, Immanuel. So this is a group photo of the Nobel family in the early 90s. And you see here the Immanuel, and then Alfred Nobel over to the right, and then Ludwig and Robert and so on. And I would like to say that you can see the man, he doesn't look very energetic, but he was Immanuel. But he was certainly not a very good businessman. So he was a good architect, so he did a beautiful building in the old town of Stockholm. And the only thing wrong with it was that it was based upon clay, so it slowly sank into the bottom of the, well, half of it sank anyway. So Immanuel had to flee, had to go away, because not ended up in the debtor's prison, and went to the Paris of that time, which was St. Petersburg. And there he took his 3 sons with him. And this is St. Petersburg of that day. He started out very modestly in a small wooden house. And he brought, among other things, he brought Alfred Nobel. And this is the only photo of Alfred Nobel when he was, I think, 17 years old. But do you know, and you are students here, he at that time spoke fluently 4 languages. They're very important because, as today, you need foreign languages to go ahead in international business. And also he was very well educated in physics and chemistry and mathematics. So he was private in school. He didn't go to any public school. But all the 4 sons of Alfred Nobel, Ludwig, Robert, Alfred, and Emil, they were all, were all very well educated. And I'll come back to that because it's an importance to understand how they were so successful. The next one here is Robert, and here's Ludwig. And the thing was that, as I said before, Immanuel, their father, was very, shall we say, creative, very inventive, not so much of a good businessman. And one of the things he invented was the world's first underwater mine. And you can see that. I don't want to go into technical details. I just want to say there was black powder, and then there was a steel ball, and when the ship hit that one, the ball crushed a vial of acid, and the acid then ignited, and some other potassium, I think, and then the whole thing exploded. So it actually worked very well. And in fact, it prevented an English invasion of St. Petersburg. So because on the ship of the admiral, they found one of those things floating around, and they picked it up, and they said they tried to find out how it worked. It worked very well. The whole ship exploded, including the admiral, so the fleet sailed away to Copenhagen. This next image just shows you how these world's first underwater mines were made. And there you see, on this next one, you see the explosions on the upper left-hand side, and the craters created by the mines. The Russian Tsar and the top officers of the army were inspecting it. And the next one you see there, on the left there is Profesor Nobel together with the Tsar inspecting the laying out of these mines. So everything went very well, but unfortunately they trusted I'm sorry to say, I shouldn't say this, but the Russian military at that time. So although they were very successful, they got a huge order to rejuvenate the so-called Vedankas. Vedankas were muscle loaders for the army. They got an order of, I think, about 120,000 of these rifles that needed to be reconstructed into normal loaders from the back. And for that they needed new wood for the crosses. And so there were not enough wood in St. Petersburg, so Ludwig and Robert said, yeah, let's go to Baku, to Azerbaijan, which was of course Russia at that time. So Robert went down there, took several weeks, I think, traveling, and found to his surprise that there was no walnut. Walnut was needed for the wood, but there was, look, what do you think was there? It was gas and oil. So when he came there, he could see what's called the Zoroaster temple, which still exists. I've been there, and they still have these flames coming up from the natural gas pushing up into the ground. And oil was everywhere. But of course, extraction was very, very primitive. And you can see, I mean, everything there was handmade, nothing industrialized. And you know, the transportation, the quality of the oil, the extraction of the oil, everything was very, very, very primitive. So the clients could never know what quality. They could buy, you know, things that completely destroyed the color of the home, or it burned. So they said, with Nobel, you know that you can, when we started, the family started producing oil in Baku, very soon they found that it would rely on quality, because Robert was a chemical engineer and actually, you know, wanted as a Swede to sell his product honestly. So this next image actually shows transportation of the oil at that time. You see the barrels and horses with sleds. Like you can imagine the cost of production was actually higher than the cost of the oil itself. So, what did the Nobel family do? Well, primarily, they did something. You see the camels, but in the back, they introduced the concept of oil storage. Maybe I should. This is very impressive. Thank you all for coming. Shall I put it? guys, don't worry, I will not start from the beginning because they're very welcome for those big numbers. Happy to see you here. And I've been talking about my great-grandparents, the brothers of Alfred Nobel, and what they did in Azerbaijan, because when Robert was sent there, one of the brothers was sent there to find wood. He didn't find any wood, but he found a lot of oil and gas. And the great contribution that the Nobel brothers actually managed to do was to completely transform a very primitive industry. And you couldn't even call it industry. They transformed it into a modern distribution system, which is just as modern as it was today. Actually, the same thing is used. So you can see here they are behind. This is the storage facility for oil. And let me tell you, this is something of an innovation, because I'm in Baku. I've seen images of workers, and what they did to store the oil was to dig out huge trenches and simply pour the oil into it. And then you see the poor workers standing there with oil up to their chests and shoveling like this. You know, you find it grateful that somebody had a good sense of producing really. And the next one is actually the tank cars, railway cars that produce the oil, and to transport the oil. And when I was in Moscow, I think it was in the 70s, to inaugurate some sort of a monument, there on the behind they had found one of those old Nobel oil, and they had Nobel oil. I felt very proud that it is still around after 100 years. Another innovation that the Nobel brothers brought about in the oil industry is this one. You know what it is? It doesn't look very impressive, but it's the world's second pipeline. Because they said, aha, instead of bringing it on wheelbarrows and normal barrels, let's pump it. And then this is what they did. So what you see here is a tiny little, the first one was in Pennsylvania by Rockefeller, Standard Oil, and this is the Nobel oil was the second one who came up with it. In Baku, and behind you can also see to the left one of the oil storage facilities. The greatest innovation that my great-grandfather Ludwig came about, you know what that was? It's the world's first oil tanker. It was called the Zoroaster. Zoroaster was the god of fire in the Indian religion. And it was made the first time in the world, very smart. They built it in Sweden, in Motala North, in sections. And then they transported up the sections of Göta Canal because it was too big to put it together down in Göteborg. And then they put it together in Baltic Sea, and then they transported it down. So this was the first of its kind in the world. I mean, a tanker to the oil storage, to pipelines, to railway cars, and so on. It completely transformed it. So, of course, they became enormously rich. They were one of the richest families of the world at that time. And now, another interesting thing, and I think that might be interesting to you guys, because you are young, is that how did they use this money? Not only to give out to the shareholders or to pay themselves huge salaries, they did a huge number of revolutionary activities. If you can see that, they built houses, they built hospitals, they clinics, they built stores, I mean for food, and they even had something which was rather unique for a time. They had profit sharing. So the workers actually got part of the profits every year from them, and they were very successful. They gave 40% profit to the dividends to the shareholders. They still had enough money to pay the nominees. So it was very, very, I mean, everything, they took care of the workers. And this is interesting because I'll tell you how this paid back, how grateful they were later. This is the mechanical factory up in Leningrad or St. Petersburg at that time. And they were also the biggest in the world. You know, they were innovative. They went down to Germany and they said, this is an interesting type of an engine. So this was Rudolf Diesel, and the first time he came up with a prototype, so he got the license or the agency for Russia, and very soon they had they had implanted diesel engines all over Russia. They also had the Alfa Laval, Swedish Alfa Laval milk separator between the trains. So I mean, they were constantly on the lookout for which they brought into Russia and they sold. So pretty soon they were Russia's biggest company with 51,000 employees, which in the 19th century was quite a lot to pay weekly wages, I suppose. Anyway, this is my great-granduncle, actually, Emanuel Nobel, and he was the last of the oil barons, so to say. And what you can see here, this is the distribution network, oil depots and oil transports in Russia at that time. And you can see the amount of shall we say, influence they had, because the oil, they had nothing like that anywhere else except in the United States at that one time. So they were very, very happy. Unfortunately, they did one mistake, and you can imagine what it was. Obviously, they shouldn't have chosen Azerbaijan for there, because in 1917, the revolution came. Actually, do you know that Joseph Stalin worked for the company, for my family company, as a oil drill bit cleaner, I think. So it's interesting to speculate what would have happened if they would have made him into a vice president, Joseph Stalin. Maybe history would have been a little bit different, unfortunately. But he was a revolutionary there, of course, and robbed banks and so on, so he went on to another direction. Now, Emanuel Nobel, the father of these three, he had gone into bankruptcy again. As I said, he was not a good businessman. So he went back to Stockholm, and there he took Alfred Nobel with him. So the next part of my speech, I'll talk about Alfred Nobel a little bit. And they didn't know what to do there, but Alfred Nobel was trained as a chemist. And there, the next guy here I will show is called Sobrero. And Sobrero was an Italian chemist who had invented something called nitroglycerin. And you know all, I'm sure, nitroglycerin, very dangerous, very effective as a blasting, shall we say, oil substance, but also very dangerous. You shook it, it exploded. You warmed it, you heated it, it exploded. It was very unstable. So what basically Nobel, son and father, Emanuel and Alfred, started to produce what they called blasting oil, which was nitroglycerin, very dangerous. Actually, I remember hearing from my family that at the factory, the workers had wheelbarrows with wheels, wooden wheels, with metal, iron strips on it. And when they pushed the wheelbarrows in the factory, there were micro-explosions from the drops of nitroglycerin there. So obviously the safety was not very, very preponderant at that time. And what happened, of course, was that there was a huge explosion in the factory. And you know, a lot of people were killed, including the brother Emil, the youngest brother of the four. Emil, he was only 21 years old at that time. Huge explosion seen all over Stockholm. And of course, the Stockholm city authorities got very upset with this. And so they've said, Alfred Nobel, from now on you go out, this is your new laboratory. That was the laboratory, it was a barge way out in the sea in Mälaren, so he could kept out of the risks of having another explosion going on. And there he sat and combined you know, all sorts of trying to invent or render nitroglycerin safe. And that he did by simply taking, it was silicon sand from a riverbed in Germany, and he mixed it with nitroglycerin, and then that became later dynamite, which you could use anything. You could cut it, you could throw it, you could put it in a fire, nothing happened. It really was a major innovative accomplishment. And you can see there, next slide, I show, for example, the Panama Canal and the Simplon tunnels. All of these major work in the industrial time was not made possible without dynamite, because it was really a revolution. The second largest, the biggest invention that Alfred Nobel did was called the blasting cap, because what use is it if you have a dynamite and you can't make it explode? So he also invented a blasting cap, which is simply a piece of wood with a powder, black powder inside, and a fuse. Light the fuse, put it in the dynamite, boom, off it goes. I mean, fortunately for Alfred Nobel, business was huge. The demand for his products were enormous. So he had at one time, I think, 60 factories around the world, all producing one thing, dynamite. Of course, they regularly exploded. I've seen some of them, but you know, that didn't matter that much at that time. Safety for workers was not in demand. But anyway, the final product was very good, was the dynamite. Alfred Nobel was, you know, there's Thomas Alva Edison. He had a lot of patents, the inventor of the lamp and so on. But Alfred Nobel was number 2 in the world. He had 365 patents. Because again, like his forefather, he was into everything. He was into, I don't want to bore you with telling you everything, but in medicine and in electricity and in metals and in everything, he was into everything. 365 patents. And this is what you see here is the world's first aluminum boat. A boat called the Lumignon, and it was the it's a Constance sea actually. He loved it, and he one of the few images of Alfred Nobel sitting there in the back. He loved that boat. But of course, the big love for him was the rockets and grenades and exploding things. And this is a very funny picture, because can you imagine where this was taken? It was taken in the bloody middle of Stockholm. You can see church spire in the back, and this is where I live. I live not far away from there, and it shows a man actually shooting a huge artillery rocket in the middle of a town. So I don't know where it went, but it was there. So, and you see the case of it also lying there. So safety was not one of the main causes. And another funny invention he had is this. And this is the world's first, at least I understand, the world's first photo of a camera shot up in a rocket, something like 180 meters high in Beaufort, where the arms factory was, and the camera took a photo of Beaufort, and then it went down again. I mean, 180 meters isn't that great, but still, the first, you have to think about it. So, the first aerial photo of it. Now, unfortunately, you might say, hey, fantastic, he was one of the richest men in the world, he was scrupulous, honest, he was a wonderful man, everybody loved him, but he was not a very happy man. He had 3 very, shall we say, unhappy love relations. The first one, she got so-called consumption, tuberculosis, in the 20s, and died, and she was French. The second was Berta von Suttner, the world's first female Peace Prize winner, who, after 1 week waiting for him in Paris, went back to Austria and married her fiancé. And the third one was Sophie Hess, a young girl he met at the spa, and he had, for 20 years he was away on traveling, and she was away on spas, and he's saying, you must educate yourself, you must learn, you must be a more brilliant, I really have to, I'm a little bit ashamed, you have to learn something. And she said, yes, darling, please send me more money. So, all in all, he was not a very happy. He was hypochondriac. He was in actually bad health, a lot of problems. He had, he used chemistry all his life. So he had inhaled a lot of chemical substances which had destroyed him. And he had nobody. The brothers had families, they were happy, they were big social lives, while he was all alone. He had just some servants. So the next one is from his house in San Remo in Italy, and there he did, you know what he did? Instead of inviting people to come and have fun and so on, he built a shooting ramp out there, which made his neighbors completely crazy, because he had guns shooting over the Mediterranean Sea there. And then, of course, he built one of the world's biggest arms factories. So people ask me that all the time. They say, how can there be peace? Why did he do a peace prize if he was only interested in gunpowder, shooting and explosives, and also in the gun? Because basically, I will come back to that later, why he chose the 5 subjects of the Nobel Prize. Wherever he went, only thing he was interested in was in his work. So this is a laboratory from Serpent, where he was expelled because the French thought he was an Italian spy, and the Italian thought he was a French spy. And so little by little, he was really only a scientist. But of course, he didn't care too much about money. He was never interested in economics, and he was never interested. He wanted vaguely to get married, but not something that he was deeply interested in. So, what did he do? He did laboratories. This is a laboratory from Karlskoga, one of these. Another laboratory, you see, the same from France. And he could spend up to 20 hours per day sitting in his laboratory. And we believe that the only time he was really happy was when he worked in his laboratory. Is that a life? I'm not sure. I'm not sure that I would have that sort of life. But I get all recommendations, shall we call it compensations in form of money and degrees and so on. He actually liked it, but he didn't care to seek it. He accumulated wealth, he didn't use it. So I don't know if I would be feeling that he's that ideal kind of life. Anyway, in 1895 and 96 actually, he sat in Paris, and he wondered what to do, because at that time you must understand that he was one of the richest men in the world, but he had no family. And people say, why didn't he give it to his family, to the other people? And that's a very simple explanation, because, the family was richer than he was. The Nobel brothers in Russia, they were far richer than he, and so they didn't need the money. And he had nobody else to give it to, so what did he do? He gave, at the end, he said, I must use my money, which I think at that time was 86 million Swedish crowns, which is about, I don't know, $1 billion, $2 billion, something like that. It was enormous. And so he started to give the prizes. And then he died in 1896 from multiple causes. The funeral in Stockholm was one of the most widely, the tens of thousands of people that attended his funeral. And what I want to show you next is the first Nobel Prize ceremony in Sweden, in Stockholm, and it was in 1901. And for example, I will let you guess who was the first guy who won the Nobel Prize in medicine. Anybody? No? William Röntgen, the X-rays. So already there, the first one, they compensated somebody that they thought would be, and the Red Cross was for peace, and so on. Coudon was for literature and so on. So all in all, and that is, I'm going to tell you later on now why our Nobel Prize, I think, will have in fact turned into the world's most recognized award. I haven't used my notes. So the first, by the way, why did he choose, there are 5 prizes: physics, chemistry, medicine, literature, and? Economics. No, that is exactly why I wanted. No, many people believe that there is a prize in economics. This is not true. He was not interested in economics and would never do a prize in economics. The reason was that I think it was in the 60s or 70s, there was a social democrat government. Palme was the prime minister, and he forced the Nobel Foundation to accept a 6th prize from the other side that Alfred had given, and that's called the Swedish government bank to the memory of, in economic science, to the memory of Alfred Nobel. That's what it is. But of course, in reality, it became a 6th Nobel Prize. So because it's given at the same money, the same medal, the same diploma, everything is the same. It's given at the same time on the 10th of December, like the other prizes. So everybody believes that it is an economic, quite rightly so. And it isn't become, it has become a Nobel Prize, but it isn't really, because he was not interested. So now, how could I asked you before, how come he bought this huge arms manufacturing company called Bofors? That's an interesting one. The reason is for that is that he believed, and he was one of the first guys in the world who believed in what is called the MAD. You know, anybody here who knows MAD? Mutually Assured Destruction, MAD. Meaning that if I have the hydrogen bomb and you have the hydrogen bomb, we will not attack each other because we will annihilate each other, destroy each other. So he really believed that. He said that if I can invent a weapon so horrible that nobody dares to use it, and I give it to everybody, there will be no war, no more war. That was a sort of a primitive form of terror balance, which I thought is not an unreasonable idea. And why, no, so I come back again, so why the unique prestige? Why is it that such a prize, which is by now over 100 years old, 115 years old, shines all above the others? Well, I would say, if you summarize it, first of all, it comes from a very long tradition. It is 100 years old. It's not something that was created last year. So it has a tradition. And there's a huge, by now, a huge group of famous people in each category that you can, if you are, hopefully, one or two or several of you will become Nobel Prize winners in the future. If you can look back and you feel that you're in the same company as many of the actual leaders of invention and of science and of other types of development. And second point is that it is very prestigious. I was the chairman for 15 years of the family, so I went every year to the ceremony, and I will show you here. You know, it's very prestigious. And, I mean, the king is there, the queen is there, they receive the prize from the hands. You're very well dressed. You can, once in per year, you can wear your decorations, and you know it's very solemn. And the music and the flowers and everything, you know, trumpets and things. That is, it's not something that you hand out and say, oh, by the way, here's the diploma. So you have one also, I might add, that there is a huge thoroughness in the selection of the candidates. You believe it's, no, you know, you get a huge number of candidates and you get a short list and then you select. No, it takes 9 months to select. And I would say that, I think it's right, it costs the same amount of money to select the winner as to give it. So it costs $1 million each year for each of the prizes to select the winner. Because you can understand, if you take the Peace Prize, for example, you know last year there was 276 candidates. Can you imagine for a committee of 5, 2, 4, or 6, or 7, depending on which year it is, to decide the winner? Who are they going to see? You know, 214 or 160? I mean, who is the best? I'm not going to talk about too much because I am not so much in favor of the current policies of the Peace Prize, but the science prizes are pretty good, and it takes a long time for them usually to find out in the 9 months. So it is a fairly respectable way of finding, you know, this peer review and the acceptance of the scientific community is very important. Because people must say, if they say, this is a shit prize, nobody. People have been trying to imitate Nobel Prizes for generations now. And one famous case is, many cases, but one guy is in, you know, the Mastar clean technology city. They put the Mastar Prize, $1.5 million. And they invited everybody on earth to submit a choice of candidates. Nobody has ever heard of the prize, again, after the first year. And the second was a Norwegian who said, we're going to give $1.5 million and I'm going to do a new Nobel Prize. And he got so much in newspaper clippings, and that was all we wanted. Because you have to have the tradition, you have to have the prestige, the peer review, that the colleagues say, yeah, he deserved the prize. You know, like recently in physics and so on. I mean, the gravity waves. I'm sure they will win, because it is a new, it's a paradigm shift in science. Not always, I agree. Sometimes you have funny choices, and there have been some very peculiar choices, but there's been over 700 prizes given. It's clear that mistakes are done sometimes. There is no combination. There are many foundations that make prizes. I won't say which American foundations where the family is, but we have no connection. The family has no connection, the foundation doesn't decide the prices, it's individuals, it's committees, you know, the Royal Academy of Science, the Royal Academy of Literature, and so on, completely independent from each other. We have no say in the choice of candidates, unfortunately. The prizes are also, and this is interesting, they are truly international. They are given to anyone, supposedly, regardless of race, nationality, creed, sex, whatever. They had the king of Sweden called up Emmanuel, you saw his, you know, the old man before with the white beard, called him saying, this is impossible, you can't give it to anyone. You can't give it to women, for Christ's sake. Women, what have they ever done? So, only to men, only to Scandinavians, and, you know, and we have to be involved in the selection of it. And Emmanuel said, no, we must respect the will of Profesor Nobel, who says we can give it to anyone. And that is part of the reason for, shall we say, the prestige of it. Another reason is, today it's not so much money, but it used to be, it's $1 million tax-free. It's a fair amount. The strange thing is that I have another thing, I have something called, you know, the Sustainability Award, the Nobel Sustainability Award, where we don't give any money at all. And people say, you must give money. No, not really, because if you look at the two other famous prizes, like the Lasker Prize, very small amount of money given, I think it's $22,000, something like that, very small. And the Fields Medal, which everybody agrees, gives out every second year as the world prize, world championship in mathematics. No money, but everybody agrees. This is the key. Everybody must agree this is the most prestigious of the prizes. So now I just want to finish by saying, now who had, in your view, which country has won the most Nobel Prizes? Anyone? Yep. And that's interesting, exactly, everybody agrees. 70% of all science prizes so far has been given to the United States, either to Americans or to people, you know, saying, why do you think that's the case? Now, we might want to discuss that later at the question and answer. So, who are the leaders? It's Harvard, UCLA, Caltech, MIT, Chicago, Stanford, and so on. The US totally dominates the list. UK, you have Cambridge and Oxford, and so on. So, 8 of 10 leading universities are located in the United States. And so I wanted to say, the Sweden, where I had part of my scientific experience. I am a professor in Japan. I lecture a fair amount all over the world. But Sweden, they are very interested because they're pretty rational people who say, why the bloody hell does America win all these prizes? We are just as good. We are Swedes. We are honest. No corruption. No thinking. And they, you know, the people, the Swedish researchers, scientists who have been over to the United States and gone back to Sweden, they report why the US wins. It is because, I tell you here, it explains the US dominance with a winning mentality, a winning mentality. The Swedish epidemiologist Hans-Olof Alamy, he's a member of the Royal Swedish Academy of Science, and he's a professor at Harvard, explains their success as a combination of very tough admission procedures, research and teaching constantly scrutinized by everybody. Everybody's open for criticism. You can't just sort of say, hey, don't come near me. and the very, very large financial resources of the prestigious universities. And he said, you can't finance large-scale research in Sweden, at least not in my area, because a huge research investment in Sweden, what does that mean? 10, 20 million Swedish crowns? For 3 times 8, $3 million. $2.5, $3 million would be a big amount. In US, investments in the project costing more than $600 or $70 million is nothing. It's okay, no problem. And I've been directly involved, sitting on boards of medical companies where just the phase 3 clinical studies to get approval from the FDA, which is needed today to sell, cost billions. It doesn't cost hundreds of millions. And it takes 10 years to get approval. I mean, this has gone overboard. It's too much. But still, it has left a lasting impression that, hey, we don't care. Spending it 10 million, 15 million, 100 million, it's okay. As long as you are successful. Big difference. Also, Adami believes that American researchers are more driven and motivated and have a greater wish to succeed compared to Sweden and the rest of the world. It's an inbred passion for excellence. And this is, he says, this is absent in the Swedish university. There's something that you don't brag, you don't talk about how good you are. If you have seen the television debates about Donald Trump, I mean, hey, I'm the best, I'm the most, I'm the fantastic, everybody loves me. And you might criticize this spirit, quite rightly so, which is not particularly European, but still it produces results. So, Arvid Carlson, he won the Nobel Prize in Medicine in 2000. He claims that the part of the American mentality is the same pioneering spirit that has continued to develop, even since the Europeans came there in the couple of hundred years ago. They are more pragmatic. Oh, that's another thing. The American researchers are also more pragmatic in cooperation with industry. They're more targeted and less competitive in research. They don't say, well, let's discuss this. I work in Japan, and you're not allowed to say no. You're not allowed to have a dissension. Everybody must agree. Consensus. Everybody loves each other. Yes, yes, yes. But it takes forever. In the United States, if it works, let's do it. Oh, it didn't work. Oh, too bad. Let's try again. It's a different kind of mentality, in my view, for many European sites. The big disadvantage is, of course, is there's a lot of resources spent which do not succeed, and also that sometimes projects advance a little too hasty. So then you have a drawback, of course, of everything. Well, anyway, so I will say that there are professionals in all stages of the evaluation in the United States. If you attend a meeting at Stanford and you have a logical explanation for what you do, people will buy it at once. At Swedish universities, it becomes more of a process of positioning themselves and focus on how the project should be conducted. It's important, I think, for the university, it might be. So, in ending, so what would be the advice for a world-renowned institution such as this university, the Taras Shevchenko National University, and other academic institutions, or for researchers, if you want to go into research? It's fun, it's really good, but you need to have the tools for it. Well, the one suggestion they had from the United States when I asked that question at Harvard would be to consider a rather flat academic organization with the focus to, or shall we say the goal to focus on resources on research and innovation, combination academic, state and industry. Because without the academics, not much will happen when it comes to research, and the state has the rather advantageous situation, at least not here, at least in other countries, saying, this is what we want to do, we will improve. The only country in Europe, or in the world, as far as I know, that have managed to introduce a large number of electric vehicles, which country would you say it is? Anybody? It's Norway. Norway, the little country with 5 million people, why have they managed to introduce, say, 20% electric vehicles? Simply by giving, the government says, no taxes, no road taxes to drive, lower gas, lower electricity cost, and so on. And a lot of advantages given for a specific purpose. And that has indeed, everybody wants a car like that. If you don't have that, why would you buy a car that you're risking only going for 80 kilometers and then stop when it's cold outside? So, to summarize, what is the key? Well, one thing would be to recruit top researchers. Come there as visiting professors, solicit funding from private enterprises, what we do a lot in Sweden, dedicated research projects, engage companies or state organizations to license universities' discoveries. Also something, too many times, I've been in Holland, I sit on a board that takes, university discovers something, and very often what happens is that it ends up gathering dust on a shelf somewhere because they lack the resources to carry it on. So what we do is we buy the license to this innovation, which hopefully is good in medicine, cancer treatment actually, and then you patent it with IP protection, and you find it, you develop it, you finance the development, and then you hopefully they will sell it to big pharma. But there's an intermediate between academics and the consumer market. So all in all, I think I've spoken enough for today, and I thank you very much for your attention. And the director, the co-rector, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
As a small payment for your lecture, this is a coin with the university building on one side and the first rector of the university, Maximovich, on the other side. It's 2 hryvnia, it's small. And you may invest in Swiss bag if you like.